Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lonely Artist podcast. I'm your host, Ariane. For as long as she could remember, art has been a part of Emily Cotton Cram's life. Emily is a 30-year-old illustrator and daydreamer living along the banks of the Mississippi on the tip of the nose of Iowa. She makes a living doing a bit of everything to do with art, but nowadays mostly enjoys crafting and drawing stories. Well, welcome to the podcast. This is my small attempt at, interviewing people and sharing people's journeys with whoever listens to me, which isn't that many people, but at least, I try.
I feel like social media has ruined our concept of like how many people is a lot of people. Because if
That's
you had a
right.
talk and you had like 10 people come to your talk, you'd be like, heck yeah. And if you had like 30 people come to your talk, people would be like, wow, that was great.
Yeah, I would be mind blown if 30 people showed up.
Yeah. So like, now we see those numbers and we're like, oh, that's nothing. But like it is. It's
That's
just
very true. You're
yeah.
totally right. And I hope that you can, bless us with more wisdom as I start asking you some questions about yourself. So, are
I'll
we ready to
try.
get started?
Yep.
Awesome. So, well, I always ask this as kind of like the baseline of the start of the podcast, and it's usually very similar for everybody, but I'm always curious because there are some people who have different beginnings to their art journey. So, how did your art journey begin specifically?
I just have like always done art. Like there's a my mom uh kind of like says that she like blessed and cursed me because my first stuffed animal was named after Michelangelo.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it's a stuffed pig and his name is Pigoletto. And yeah, but I've got a lot of I have some artists in my family and I just picked up a pencil and just never set it down. Just kept on going. And I mean, I didn't always want to be an artist, but I always was doing art. And
Right.
eventually I realized that when I was like wanted to be a paleontologist or marine biologist or regular biologist, but I would always use art to do all my projects or to study what I was doing. And I was like, wow, maybe I should just put the other stuff down and focus more on art and use that other stuff to make my art better instead of using art to try to prop up the science.
Gotcha. And did you eventually study anything related to art, or did you study something related to science and then started, taking art more
Oh no,
seriously?
I went to school for art and theater and philosophy.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's what I went to school for. But I ended up not completing my degree because I just realized fine art path wasn't for me. So
Gotcha. Is there any like particular reason why fine art wasn't working for you?
um well, I just really have always been drawn to more narrative, um, like lowbrow structures. Like I've always loved kids' books. I've always loved comics. I've loved graphic novels since I was like got my hands on them when I was like a young teenager. And but I never thought that that was like a career path I could follow until I got into college and was doing art and talking with other fine artists, and I realized that they didn't make any money either. So so I was like, okay. And also this sounds so mean, and I'm sorry to anyone who's like loves fine art, but I grew up like around some people who did like fine art, and a lot of fine artists is just like bullshit. It's
Yeah.
just like really pretentious bullshit. And I just want people to be able to afford and enjoy art that don't have to have a art degree.
Right. I think it's very subjective, and I think it's more to do with like the artist's reputation as opposed to their ability or their craft or anything like that when it comes to fine art, personally.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's all about who you are, who you know,
Mm.
how much your work's bought, like established price for, and so how much can one person buy it and then like use that money to like you know, like a way to like hide money. Like that's pretty much what I realized a lot of it was. If you really made it into the fine art world, it was just a lot of stuff that I just really didn't agree with morally.
Right. Yeah, of course.
So I was like, man, what am I doing? And then I was taking philosophy courses and I was like, man, what am I doing here? And so I left.
It was kind of like two conflicting things at once that you were learning as you were studying this.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting because I think it gives you a different perspective now that you've like stepped out of that path and now you have this desire to make art something completely opposite from that exclusive, world of fine artists.
Yeah, I like after I left, I worked like odd jobs for years, a bunch of different stuff, and I worked at pursuing illustration because I thought I wanted to illustrate kids' books, but then I uh, ended up just not doing that because a mix of not getting paid enough and because people just want you to illustrate kids' books for fun because they think it's a fun little project.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. It's
Jesus.
not. And then on the other side is I ended up stopping that, at least like pushing for that, like getting hired by a publishing company because I wanted to make art that was like, I guess, you know, more adult.
Mhm.
I was like, I don't want to just draw like a little kid on a beach,
Right.
which is what I did for one of the kids' books I illustrated because I have illustrated a couple, but it's like I just wanted to pursue other things,
Of
and that's
course.
what I did. So and then I eventually started picking up comics, and that's what I'm doing now.
And when did you get interested specifically in like the world of web comics?
Oh man, um, specifically, uh, like I read a little bit in high school, but that was like so long ago. It was like all on DeviantArt. And then I just got away from all that stuff for so many years. And then I actually read Lore Olympus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, man, this is different than so many comics I see. And I liked how colorful it was, and I liked that it wasn't just all action.
Hmm.
And I was like, dang, uh, I'm gonna like read some more web comics. And then I kind of fell down a hole.
The
Now I read
rabbit hole.
almost all indie stuff, but like, but yeah, I actually really love like I still love Lore Olympus. It just like it made me aware that a bunch of the comics that I was reading, there was like a world, because otherwise I'd almost only read physical comics, and a lot of them were like very gritty, very more Western style, or like manga.
Mhm.
And I never really felt like I had a place in any of that. Like I couldn't make a story because nothing I did would fit. And
Right, yeah.
it was nice to see something that didn't quite fit either of those.
It's always very refreshing to see something that's completely different from the norm succeed because it gives you that like I guess hope or just the motivation to do something unique yourself and pursue that as well.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so if this person who made something that was totally off the wall, like they can do it, all right, me too. Yeah,
Right.
it just I don't know, Chanka just gave me a little more interest in getting back into comics, which is something I like dreamed of doing when I was younger, but didn't really feel like it was ever an option.
Mhm. And when you before you even started making comics, like was there any point where you were doing traditional art since you were doing like fine art and then you transitioned over to digital art?
Oh yeah, I've been a traditional artist like almost my entire life. It's only been like the past like I think 4 or 5 years that I started doing digital.
Not very
It was a
long at
hard
all.
transition. It was a hard transition.
Oh, I feel you. I was also exclusively traditional, and transitioning to digital was just the worst experience in the world.
Yeah, I'm very glad I did it because it sped up my workflow to a point that's just like beautiful that I would not have had traditionally, especially with comics
Right.
and other illustrations, just everything. But like I could show you the art that I was doing traditionally like with watercolor and gouache and pencil and ink and stuff, and then I could show you what I could do digitally at the same time. Like I made art for a show, and I did some digital art, traditional art, and the digital art looks like complete shit. Like you look at it and you're like, damn, that's bad. And the traditional art is beautiful because it's different. People don't
Yeah,
think it's different, but it's different, and it's a new medium. It really is.
completely. It's such a hard transition, and I feel you on that so much.
Yeah, I see so many people be like, "Oh, digital's easier, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Not really. I mean, it's just different. It's
Yeah.
just different."
And I mean, I don't feel like it took you that long, honestly, to like transition. You said you started like what, 5 years ago with digital?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I think I started digital like back in 2013. And it took me like 7 years to like start feeling comfortable with what I was making as opposed to what I could make traditionally.
I don't think I would have been able to do it without having like a really simple program.
Hmm.
Because I shouldn't say I didn't do digital until 5 years ago. When I was in college, I did do a digital um, imaging program, and it was all through Photoshop, and it was like the worst experience ever. I mean, like I enjoyed the class, but I had no idea what I was doing. I like drew with the mouse.
Oh my God, your poor wrist.
I know, and like I just like I had no idea what I was doing, and it was so hard. And after that, I was like, well, I don't think I'll ever do digital again.
Not with a mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
First
I
thing,
realized I had to get a tablet if I wanted to do digital.
yeah, the first thing that comes to mind with that is like carpal tunnel. Like, oh my God, that must have been very painful for you.
It's only a semester, so it was okay, but yeah.
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 And like, let's come back to you starting to get interested in web comics. How did the Vampire Librarian come into the picture? Like, how did that begin for you?
Um so I've like been creating stories for just a really long time. That was just like something I did as a kid, something I did as a teenager. And like the world that the story exists in originally developed when I was um in high school, like 17 or 18, and kind of just evolved. It's not the same characters, but like that's where the base is from. The characters for the Vampire Librarian, or at least a couple of them, are actually kind of happened in a dream. I had like a dream that was like very dark, a lot of blood, cannibalism, monsters, and I have like very vivid dream. I don't dream a lot, and most of my dreams are pretty horrible. But every once in a while, I get one where I'm like, man, that was great. That was a wild trip, and that was one of them, and it just stuck. And that was like 7-ish years ago,
Mhm.
and it's just kind of gone from there.
I love that. I mean, I know that some people hear you say like, "Oh, there was cannibalism and blood and whatever," and they're like, "Oh man, that sounds horrible." But for me, like dreams like that, the most intense ones are always the ones that like give me so much inspiration and like motivation to create art. I suppose it's the same for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it all depends on the context, right? I mean,
Hmm.
like I grew up on a farm, and I grew up around a lot of blood and gore,
Okay.
and just like naturally, like it was just there.
Hmm.
Um, and so I don't know, maybe it's a little trauma response or something, but I'm very comfortable with creating that. Like it doesn't feel necessarily like horrible to me. It's just a natural part of life is that. Like
No, I
so
totally get that.
yeah. So it's just I don't know, like, and as long as the story's compelling,
Hmm.
yeah, like it's yeah, and like just the vividness of it is like you said, like they stick with you. And
Hmm.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, like I can't not like I can't forget this. So like it kind of like a sign, right? Like your
Mhm.
subconscious is telling you that something's going on in there and you need to explore it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Vampire Librarian has like a bunch of different inspiration from a ton of different stuff, but like that is the original. That is the original place where it came from, was from a dream.
That's its birthplace.
Yeah, its birthplace is my messed up subconscious.
I mean, I love that. I think it's fantastic. Probably now we're more shielded than ever from, you know, gore and very intense, weird things about life and things like that. But in general, I feel like the world is gory and it's bloody and it's intense, and we're just not exposed to it as much, maybe most
I
people.
think the weird thing is I think we are exposed to it, but in the most neutered way,
Hmm.
right? Like on the internet, you see like a video of someone getting beheaded,
Yeah.
but you've never seen blood in real life,
Yeah, you're
barely.
detached from it. There's this like discrepancy there.
Yeah, yeah. And so people, it is very strange. It's very strange. It's a very strange world.
But I think it will be interesting to see how your personal experience with that in real life will translate to the way you create and tell your story. And I think that's probably something
Oh
that, for
yeah.
me at least, is really fresh.
Yeah. One thing that I also find really hard to sometimes translate is like what I consider appropriate versus what censorship considers appropriate, or like
Yeah.
other people. And it's very interesting, very strange, to like have that dissonance.
It's horrible. Those
Yeah, it is. It
corporate
is
assholes
horrible.
just shitting on everybody's creativity.
Yeah, and like I don't know, I just like I mean I get I some censorship. Well, to be honest, I don't really get that much censorship. One thing I don't understand, especially about a lot of web comics online, is that you can totally have way more gore than you can have sexuality, but
Mhm.
like sex is just part of human nature, where uh, gore necessarily isn't. I mean,
Yeah.
like I think that's kind of a very strange thing that I've noticed, like a strange phenomenon.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I've noticed that too. Like, oh yeah, you can look at this video of somebody getting beaten up, but don't look at this nipple because you're gonna die.
Right, like a nipple or a butt, like
Yeah.
totally not okay. And I'm like, okay, really?
It's kind of hard to work with that kind of censorship because it really doesn't make much sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't. I've come to accept that I will have not safe for work stuff, different like my Patreon or my website or something like that, and censor it for um, sites, because that is just how that is.
Yeah. And do you think, like, would you say it's easy for you to visualize whatever you see in your dreams and like translate it into artwork? Like, are you satisfied with that translation to the physical world of like art?
Oh God, no, not at all. Not at all. I wish I could be, but I've never. I rarely have an image that actually translates well, that I have like in my head.
Mm,
That's like a beautiful image. Like I'll have like an idea, but if I have a very clear image in my head, I usually make the thing and I'm like, man, that's fine. I try to stick more with like if I like concepts, and keep
mhm.
them out of like a detailed idea, because
Yeah.
I just have never. Maybe someday I'll hit that, but I've never done it.
No, me neither. It's so hard. Like,
I
I,
know some people have, and I'm like, dang, really? That's amazing. Good for you.
you know what I feel happens, at least in my experience, is like I'll try and recall the specific like visual thing that I saw, but as I'm trying to like draw it, kind of like escapes me. It's very nebulous. I don't know how
Yes.
else to explain it. It just you imagine it and you can see it clearly, but the moment you open your eyes and you try and like do the thing, it just disappears.
Yeah, yeah. And I just like I just don't think, like I don't want to say like my skill level can't do it, because it's not even that. It's that like the style that sometimes I see stuff in my head is just not the style I want to draw in.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
like maybe I love certain styles of stuff. I'm like, wow, that's so beautiful. It's gorgeous. I love it so much, but I have no interest in drawing super realistic stuff.
Yeah, I get
Like,
that.
yeah, like, so I'm like, oh, it's not happening. Stylistic it is. Uh, so it's fine. I mean, as long as I can capture some type of feeling of the art, that's
Mhm.
what I think is most important. Like the
Yeah,
feeling that I was going for.
I agree with that for sure. What would you say like your favorite thing about making comics is?
Uh, hmm. Well, I really like the feeling when it's all done. Like when I finished, especially like I finish a chapter, I finish a short story, and I can look at it and read through it. It's just like a really like it's like you some nice euphoria moment of
Mm.
like I made this a comprehensive story, and I really dig that. I also like seeing people's react. I have this is new because I long form stuff is I'm relatively new to, and recently I've gotten a lot more readers than in the past, and
Yeah.
seeing people's reactions to things is very interesting. I kind of like it. I didn't know if I would, but I do like it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of like nourishes you too, especially when you're doing this like long project. It's almost like running a marathon, so you do need a little bit of motivation from people encouraging you.
It is like running a marathon. It really is. Like I've had to take a little break from posting, and I've definitely felt like I'm like, oh man, I miss the weekly comments.
Mm,
But I've
yeah.
needed to build my buffer back up, and I was like, well, I need to do this. But I was like, man, I actually really miss my readers, and I was like, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's cute. I love
Yeah,
that you build this like relationship with people who support you. It's nice. It's a lovely feeling.
yeah, it is.
And what would you say is the hardest thing about making comics for you?
Oh man, I think like a mix between writing,
Mhm.
um, because I don't always feel most confident in my like physical writing. I think that's the newest part. I've been writing for a long time, but usually it was like hidden. It's just like writing in my head, writing on writing in a document. No one sees light of day. And now, like being like, well, now I have to write this story and make it comprehensible instead of just a jumble in my head.
Right.
Um, and that's very different. Uh, I'd say the other half is just staying on task because I would love just to like uh, fuck around and draw my characters doing I don't know other shit that isn't talking like this recent comic spoiler. They're in a room and there's a lot of talking and
Mhm.
it's I don't want to say it's boring to draw, but
Yeah.
it's a little boring for me to draw.
You just want the action.
or just like stuff, like I
Yeah.
you want to draw them smooching, you want to draw them doing something cool. You don't want to draw them
Mhm.
like doing boring stuff, but the boring stuff has to happen sometimes. So
Yeah. I do find that those moments of like transitioning from one thing to another and there's dialoguing there, it's always kind of like the hardest to get through when you're drawing it for sure.
right, and you got to have downtime in stories because otherwise, if you just have action, 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 there's no time to breathe. So
Mhm.
you got to have time for things just kind of be, rest periods.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to get through those. Like it's a little hard to not lose
Yeah.
stamina on them.
Yeah, I mean it's part of the whole like the comparison with the marathon, you know. You would love to run the entire marathon like just as fast as you could, but you just physically can't.
Yes.
You need those moments of rest.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good. It's just I was like, you're just questions like, what's the hardest? And I was like, man, What is the hardest? Oh, that and drawing men. That's been a new
Oh,
thing. I used to not draw any men. I used to only draw women. And then I
yeah.
started making comics. I was like, damn, gotta draw some men. That's challenging. So that's the other hardest part, I suppose, was learning to draw men. Not realistically. I could draw them realistically, but stylistically, I was like, how do their faces work? How does this work?
Yeah, I also struggled with that at the beginning when I started making comics, because before I would only draw women. And I mean, I have two comics, right? So one of them, the half of the cast is men. So it was
Yeah.
like I have to force myself to do this. And at first they all looked like weird looking women with short hair.
Yes. Yes.
But
Just
eventually,
funny,
yeah.
just funny looking.
Mhm.
A lot of my characters are still pretty still have that feminineness, but it's just, like it's gotten better, but that was hard. Some
Yeah,
of my friends really helped me through some of that, giving me tips. They're like, yeah, this person should look like this. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Good.
that's
Let's do
awesome
that.
that you could like rely on your friends to help you out with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If all else fails and you get any kind of criticism, you just be like, they're all non-binary, okay? It doesn't matter how they look. They look
I also
beautiful.
like I'm a big fan of like I don't know, people just look so many different ways.
Hmm.
I mean, like when people are always like, "Oh, they have to look like this because they're like they're this gender or this." I'm like, you just don't even know. I
Yeah,
mean, there's
that's true.
people look like any which way.
Hmm.
Uh Also, it's my comics, so they can look however I want. I want.
Exactly. It's my world, okay?
Yeah.
And do you like follow any kind of specific process when you make your comics or your comic pages? Like, would you say you're an organized creator or a disorganized creator?
I'm probably like in a little mix of both, but I'm probably more in an organized camp just because otherwise I would not get this long form done. My
Hmm.
first long form was a comic called Norfolk, and it's based in the same world, but I realized I was making it because I was afraid to make the Vampire Librarian, which comes before Norfolk, and I was like, dang it, I have to do this other one first, even though it's big and scary. Um, but like I tried to just wing it,
Yeah.
and it did not work. I had an idea, I had some dialogue, I had some plot, but I didn't have stuff nailed down,
Hmm.
and it got so stressful. So when I that folded, I came back and I was like, I have to do this differently this time if I want to make this work, and I really want to make this work. So I started writing a script, like I
Mhm.
learned in theater. So not a traditional comic script, but like a theater script because that's what I knew how to do. And got all my plot together and figured out character design and some, you know, and then I have a friend who is my editor. Shout out to B Shares. uh, so like I had my stuff starting to get looked over,
Yeah.
and then I started drawing it. And um, first I sketch out the whole chapter.
Mhm.
I do the whole chapter at once, um, or like the whole scene, So that can be anywhere from like 20 to 60 pages. And then I go in and I lay all the dialogue in bubbles so I know where everything should be. So then I can draw around it so nothing's getting smushed in.
Yeah.
And then I send it to my editor and they look it all over and we talk about what works, what doesn't, um, and have a discussion about that kind of stuff. And then I go in and I ink it after I go through. Sometimes when I'm inking it and actually getting everything laid down, like seriously, I'll go back and redraw or add stuff because I'm crazy and can't leave things alone. So that's unorganized, but yeah, then I ink stuff, and then I go after that. I go in and put in my color flats, and then I try to do that, in whole groups. Or like right now, I will go and I do like I flat like 3 pages every day because I
Okay.
hate flatting so much.
Oh, me too. Me too. I hate it so much.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
It's
So I
boring.
love lining. I love coloring. I like sketching out the chapters, even though it feels a little brain breaking doing it, because I sketch in pages, not in
Mhm.
the strips. So
Yeah.
I have to think about what it'll translate to on a strip. for like webtoon,
Yeah, that
but
must be kind of
also
hard.
it is, but I'm glad I do it because I really kind of dream of having stuff printed someday.
Hmm.
And also it works better on my tablet that way. um, so and I post on like other sites that it's kind of nice to have a page. I don't know, I'm attached to the page. Maybe I
Yeah.
won't be someday, but I am now. And yeah,
It's
and then I do
our old
color.
school like form of reading comics, and like I feel like generations that are younger are like more used to the scrolling,
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
more like still romanticizing that like printed format.
I like
So
both. I love
yeah.
the accessibility of webtoons because they're beautiful, and I actually really love the scroll, but I
Hmm.
also love having a book in my hands.
Yeah, I get that.
Like I just I love both of them. Um, I want, I actually like there's a few web comics that have had printed books that I follow, and I've like bought them even though I've read the comic online, but I still buy them. So I'm like, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, yes, that's the process: sketching, editing, lining, and then flats, and then I go in and color, and then I for webtoon I go and I break up the panels into a strip and send it off.
So you go through like an organized pipeline with moments of being disorganized.
Yes, yes.
I love that. I would love for you to tell me a little bit about like your style, because your style is something that actually was one of the first things that motivated me to reach out to you. I feel like you have a very particular and unique style, and I wanted to know if you like made a conscious effort to develop it, or if it was something that with time sort of like manifested itself.
Kind of both.
Okay.
Um, it's strange. I've always had a really distinct style, or at least people have told me that. I've always just drawn stuff, and it's just kind of happened.
Mhm.
But I will say this: I at one point was just like really reaching to to do realism,
Okay.
and I did it. I have some art where it's like very realistic, very very realistic, and it was cool to hit that. It was cool to be like, yeah, look at me, I can draw a person and that looks just like a person. And then where do you go? It's
Right.
boring. It was so boring. I was like, yeah, I can draw realistic people, and I just thought that I didn't have it. And so I started to draw realistic stuff but crazy, so like animal heads on humans, or humans on animal heads, and other just really weird shit. And it just kind of devolved. But then when I started working on like illustration stuff, I realized I needed a lot more simple style.
Yeah.
So I had to like make a conscious effort to be like, okay, how do I draw noses with 4 lines? You know?
Right. Yeah.
Um, because I
Simplifying
always really liked,
everything.
yeah, yeah. So it took a while, but eventually my art kind of fell into the groove of like having a style but simplified. But if you just like set me loose and were like, hey, doodle something, it would probably be a lot more, it's generally a lot more realistic, just because that's like a comfort zone for me.
Realism
Even if
is.
it's funky. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So like you would say that you pay more attention and effort into like the drawings that are more illustrative, like cartoonish or comic
Yeah,
for the comic.
stylized.
Yeah,
Yeah, stylized. Stylization is really fun, but it's a really big challenge for me.
gotcha.
Like to to push past what should be to what something feels like, because so much of like drawing like cuz no one cares if someone's face has the right proportions if it makes them feel the way the character is supposed to be feeling. Like,
Yeah.
when someone's yelling in a comic, like their mouth is huge.
Mhm.
You can see all their teeth. Idea sometimes, depending, but like if you drawing someone realistic doing that, it's different, but you don't
Yeah.
get the same kind of feel it's all about how stuff should feel versus how stuff looks in real life, and I love that so much. But I spent so many years chasing realism, and I don't want to say it ruined me because that's like, it's all a journey, but I definitely feel like I've spun my wheels really hard throughout my art journey, learning all these different things, doing all these different things, and then coming back and being like, throw all that away.
Discard all of this.
Yeah, we're doing this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I understand that. But I think it's interesting that your safe place or your default or your kind of baseline goes or leans towards realism more than your very, like, I would say, at least for me, recognizable style that you have currently for your comic.
Yeah, it's been and even the style has changed as I've been working on the comic, and it is very interesting. I mean, it's always an evolution.
Yeah.
My style has kind of shifted a lot too. It generally doesn't like to stay the same, which was kind of a worry when I started working on the comic, because I was like, oh no, my style likes to shift, my subject matter likes to shift. Will I be able to keep with this for years? And I don't know, it's been a while, and even though my style has shifted slightly, it's been really fun, and a big challenge, which is generally why I end up switching stuff up, is I like a challenge. So
Right. Do you enjoy like looking back at your first chapters? Or is that something that you're kind of annoyed at because you see the changes that you have now and that, the things that have changed now for you?
I think it's like, I used to do that a lot with art, where I would go, oh, this sucks. I look back and go, this is a mistake, this is a mistake, this is a mistake. But I've kind of pushed past that. And now when I look back, I go, dang, I've really figured out how to do stuff better. Stuff feels more right now. So I mean, because they're baby chapters. I mean, the first chapters of almost any comic you see though is like, they're very rarely where you're like, damn, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Or at least until you get like later on, like if someone's reading, when I first did the first chapter, I was like, this looks pretty good. And there's parts of it that I still really love, and there's parts that I was like, if I were to do a reboot or something, I would fix. But like, I don't know. It's all about moving forward,
I love that mindset, and it sounds a lot healthier than just like punishing yourself for things that you did in the past or you hadn't yet learned a few other things that your future self now knows.
I think it's like caught in the mentality of the stuff being better.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the chapters or some of the past chapters maybe weren't as like slick, but being slick isn't everything. There's something kind of nice about things not being perfect too.
Yeah.
And it's all about like we as creators are so critical, where I saw this stat and I truly believe it because I timed myself reading through a chapter of a few webtoons one time. People in general spend like 10 seconds looking at a panel.
Mm-hmm.
Or less.
Yeah, that sounds like you like a lot, actually.
Yeah, like 10 seconds or less. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say a lot of people are spending like 5 seconds reading a panel, especially if it's not complex. That person is not thinking about your shit.
Yeah.
Like they're just consuming the story.
Right.
So as long as your stuff is channeling the people's story and keeping them engaged, it's okay. Like it's all right. That stuff isn't all perfect all the time, especially when we're like one man banding it, like, or almost like we're doing all this shit. Like I have an editor and I have a few friends who I bop ideas off of, but I do all the art, I do all the writing, I do
it's a one-man show and it's so much.
Yeah, so if stuff isn't perfect, that is the way it is, but it's also like my true vision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool too. It's not a group of people, it's mostly mine.
Yeah.
And that's pretty neat too.
I think it's super cool. And, thinking about that, and it just makes me respect the work so much more because although you collaborate with your friends and you get help because it's, I feel like it's almost impossible not to get some help in one way or
Oh,
another when creating a
yeah.
project.
I have
Um,
dyslexia, so if I didn't have an editor, it would be absolutely we would not be able to read the comic. Like it would be a mess. So I have to have an editor. That's the deal.
yeah. But I mean, I just think it's such a respectable medium because it's really hard and it's very competitive.
It is. It is very competitive. It's a wild ride. Did not it's been crazy so far. I've had like some really good reception that's very much surprised me.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it is a competitive bunch, like
Yeah.
competitive everything.
Tell me a little bit about like who your biggest art inspirations are as well.
Oh man. Well, it kind of like are you thinking like comics or like more like just in general?
I keep it pretty general because I feel like some people don't even care all that much about other artists. Like some people get inspired with music. Some people get inspired with their daily life. So it's not specific to like comic book artists. Like it could be whatever inspires you to create your own work.
Well, excellent, because I have a few favorite comic book artists, but it's very generalized.
That
um,
works.
I'd say like my like growing up, I was super inspired by all pre-Raphaelite drawings, which is why I was trying to do realism. But one thing I still really love about all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
like this name is probably like no one knows, but John Collier, who made like the famous Lilith painting, is that they're all like very erotic without being erotic, and I dig
Mm.
that. They're all very like soft. There's a lot of hidden meaning in them. There's a lot of stuff going on that you have to look at to pay attention to, and that's really inspiring. Um, I very inspired by a lot of like old 90s manga. Like um, I grew up like reading that, and even though I don't think my stuff particularly looks just like manga now, um, I have like a lot of inspiration from like story to like plot to character development from like, oh man, I'm gonna butcher this name, but it's the person who made Yu Hakusho, and like it's Yorisho Togashi. Yeah,
Don't worry
terrible
about
pronouncing
pronouncing the
names.
name right because like I always write the names in the description of the podcast so like people can just read
Sounds it's
themselves.
perfect. It's
So,
perfect. Yeah, because
so
I was like, I cannot speak Japanese. I cannot do it. I'm sorry.
I'm not
And then
gonna
probably
make you
like
go through like that suffering. It's okay.
yeah. Probably my biggest inspiration that is really funny is probably Neil Gaiman. I love everything Neil Gaiman
Oh
does,
my
and
God, me too.
I remember one of my favorite kids books was Coraline,
Oh my
and I
God.
didn't know that was by him until I was an adult. Um,
He is such a good writer.
yeah,
It's
his
just
books
like,
just like have always transported me and made me
mm,
feel so at home,
that's so cool.
while also being challenged.
Yeah. I think like I see that quality in your work though, like what you were saying first about, there's this like eroticism to your work, but it's not necessarily that you're trying to make it erotic or mysterious or dreamy. It's just kind of the way it feels, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, and that's that makes me happy because that is kind of like a lot of the art that I'm drawn to is that. And
Yeah,
so I love to think that my art has that, but me looking in, I'm like, does it? I don't
it
know.
does completely. Like, I mean, I saw your art and I was like, I gotta befriend this person.
I
I
mean,
was
I
like,
should say that I'm like, don't try, because I have a lot of like there's a lot of nudity around, but it's I don't know. It's it's not always just like sex, more like just existence.
Right.
But sometimes like the power of that is very erotic. Like
Yeah.
I have some characters that it's obviously that like they're not nude because it's sexual. It's like they're nude because they don't give a shit. And that's like that is powerful and sexy. And there's like that's I like that. Like I like that uh self I don't know. Like just I can't even think of the word because I can't. But you know, like just because confidence isn't it, but just like the no fucks given quality I enjoy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which is sexy in and of itself. So it's kind of like
yeah,
it's a loop there.
yeah.
And tell me a little bit about like if there are any people that you are inspired by or look up to, but that aren't necessarily like big artists that a lot of people know, like just smaller accounts or artists that you know that you feel like maybe deserve some more attention.
Like people who are like on peer level, like people who are like yeah smaller. Some of the webcomic people like uh one in particular who actually also got me really excited about making webcomics was the person who writes Tiger Tiger, which is not on Webtoon. And
Okay.
they also do page format, but that is it is a black and white gay fantasy pirate webcomic
Ooh.
that has a lot of that has a lot of jokes about sea sponges in it, and it scratches just the right itch for me. And the person who makes it is her name is uh, Perta Norla. She's uh, somewhere in Europe. So once again, bad
Don't
pronouncing
worry,
last
we'll
names.
just link her stuff and so people
Yes,
can
yeah,
find
I
it.
love her stuff so much. It's so inspiring. Just because the intricacy of her pages are just beautiful, and her story and her characters, it's great. I love it. You can tell she puts a lot of time into her shit. Uh,
Nice.
there's so many artists, and just like everything. There's so much stuff. It's incredible. Like there's so many talented creators out there. Um, it's wild.
Yeah, it's
Um,
kind of hard to like list them because you want to list everybody, right? But
yeah, yeah. One of my friends is making a really cool comic that's like a retelling of a Cinderella story, but modern and gay.
oh man, yes.
Yeah, and that's called Inheritance. And once again, only know people by their screen names. But yeah, that's another really good one
We'll
that I've
make sure to
enjoyed.
link her too.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
Um,
everybody will be linked here. So
everyone will be linked. It's great. It's great. Um, yeah. I don't know. It's just wild.
and what
Other
oh sorry.
inspirations. I probably another really big comic inspiration, but this isn't small because it's a really popular series. Is probably Saga. I really love Saga. Um, but they're very well. That's a very well known comic, even though
Yeah.
it's physical and not a web comic. But
Mhm.
that's probably the other really big one.
We'll make sure to put it in your list of big art inspirations.
Yeah.
And what advice could you give to people who follow you that maybe want to become artists themselves or just starting out with their comics?
I always feel I get asked this question kind of a lot whenever I do public stuff, especially by like younger people who want to pursue it. And uh, I don't know, I feel kind of conflicted about the answer because like it's not like an easy path. At one point I was like working 3 jobs, just like no time or sleep, and everything sucked. And then when I became freelance full time, I just also just ground myself to the bone for so many years.
Mhm.
But I really think it's worth it if you care about it enough. But you have to care about it enough to put in just a shit ton of time and effort.
Yeah.
Um, just but it's worth it if you do.
Yeah, I don't know why people think that art is just like frolic around life and then are happy all the time and
no.
everything's just like rainbows.
Yeah, no, it's just like so many years. In fact, it's been kind of it's been strange. The year before the pandemic, I finally kind of got my career going after many years of it being rocky, and then the pandemic hit, and I am doing well for whatever for how crazy the world is. I'm living, and that's great. But
Yeah.
like the years before that, I just didn't even have a social life. Like I didn't see anyone outside of like my very basic art sphere just because I didn't have time. You know, I was just making
Hustling.
things, doing commissions, did not have time to just live. And looking back, it's wild. So that's but I mean other people are able to. I don't know. I'm in a different position. I live in a rural area. Um like it's different wherever you are. Every path is different.
Yeah.
But you do have to work really hard, draw all the time. If you're young and you're doing it, you should be drawing like a lot. Like
Agree.
not art projects, right? Like teacher give you an art project, like that's whatever. You should be drawing. You should have a sketchbook. You should be tearing through your sketchbooks.
Just getting it all out.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know. Draw what you like though. And but sometimes draw stuff you don't like too, because eventually, especially if you want to do comics, you will have to. And otherwise you'll be like me, a 30-year-old artist practicing backgrounds because they don't like backgrounds and have never really had to do them before. So
does anybody like backgrounds? Like I hate them.
Some people do, and I don't. I mean, I've kind of found a love in them.
Yeah.
Like I've been figuring out how to do them so that I actually like them, which is one trick of doing web comics or comics in general, or art in general, is finding the little things you like about projects and projects that you hate.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. It's brutal.
It's like my advice to you people is it's brutal. Okay, so brace yourselves.
I mean, also really fun. Like my life is so cool. Like next week I'm doing a mural workshop with a bunch of teenagers and teaching them how to paint murals.
That's amazing.
So like, yeah. So like I have a cool life, but it's also comes with like those other things that aren't as cool, like managing your own taxes as a freelance artist.
Oh my god, yeah. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, or like being organized, like forcing myself to be strict about my comic stuff, like keep on schedule. Like there's lots of stuff that's super fun and there's lots of stuff that isn't fun. Just like I suppose any cool job, because it's still a job.
Yeah, that is true. That is true for sure. And it does require discipline at the end of the day if you want to succeed.
Yeah, that's like a hard pill. I have a lot of friends who kind of romanticize freelance and they go, I wish you could be a freelance artist, I wish you could be a freelance artist. How do you do it, Emily? And I'm like, well, see how you're out here tonight hanging out with your friends? Well, I don't do that very often because I work all the time. Which that's not necessarily healthy. I'm not saying people to do that, but that's how I make it work.
Yeah. And what would you say are your plans for the future, like regarding your work, your social media presence, your comic? Like, is there any goal in mind for you in the near future?
Oh man, my goal now is to finish my comic.
Okay.
That's what I want. I want to finish my comic, and ideally, I want to do a Kickstarter for maybe a book or something. I think that would be really cool. I would love. This is a really boring goal, but it's still a goal. I would love to make enough on my comic to hire a flattener and be comfortable.
Oh my god, that's an amazing goal.
Yeah, that's a goal. Because that would be cool. And I don't know. I'm gonna just keep on doing what I've been doing. Social media is kind of a mess because I have kind of an okay following, decent sized following, but Instagram hides stuff from everyone, so I don't know. But I'm having a fun time on Webtoon and Twitter, and Instagram's nice enough for what it is. Um, but I wish I had to be honest, that's a pretty big goal to me. I think that's like my goal now, is just that, is finishing my comic, hopefully telling it as truly as I can, and then telling the other parts of my comic, like my other stories that come after that I need to do.
Well, I'm sure you're gonna be able to reach that goal and so much more. So I don't think you have to worry about it too much.
We'll check back in like 4 years or something.
We'll do like, where are they now?
Where are they now? 5 years later, still working on this comic.
And finally, my favorite question of them all is, if you could have any magical art power to help you in your artistic process, what would you like it to be?
Man, I'm torn between the magical power of being able to just like draw well, I shouldn't say, I've gotten a lot better at drawing hands without reference. God, I'm like bitching about flattening so much. I was like, just being able to just wave my hand and be like, bam.
Oh
colors.
my God, yes, I support that power so much.
Especially if I could just like pick the color, like if I could just be like bop, bop, bop. That'd be amazing. Like
that would be amazing.
Like I do one of the stupider things I do with my comic that is like just pure whimsy, is that I spend a lot of time doing like color design around each chapter. Each chapter has its own color scheme because I'm an idiot. And that's how I like to do it, because each chapter has like its own feel. And so I'm like, I'm going to design a color palette for this. And so I do that, and it's stupid. And
I don't think it's stupid at all. It sounds like a pro move that nobody does because we're all lazy.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is like I've seen before and I'm passionate about, but like doing it is so stupid. Like I'm like, I did it for the first couple, and now this one I'm doing my current chapter. There's some very particular color choices, and I'm like, you fucking idiot. You absolute idiot. You have to draw firelight. What? Why? So I'm figuring out that kind of stuff.
It's like, why did I have to do this to myself?
Yeah. It's definitely like, I'm like, this wasn't it. If I can pull it off, it'll look really cool. If I can't, I'll just be really annoyed. But yeah, if I had a magical power, I would just be like, well, bam, just color.
Well, I'm sure you'll
pages.
pull it off.
That's what I do.
I believe in you. So
yeah.
Let's see. Let's check back. Let's check back in like 5 years. See how it goes.
Appreciate it. Yeah. I'm hoping. I mean, I'm making good progress. So we'll see where we are.
I really hope that you enjoyed this episode today, and I hope that you join us back for another episode soon.